Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be focusing on Egypt's supportive role of the Arab causes, mainly the Libyan file, the upcoming elections taking place on December 24, the presidential and the parliamentary elections as well. We're going to be also looking, taking a closer look at President Assisi's speech for the UN General Assembly, the 76th session of the UNGA. And joining us here tonight in the studio to shed more light on these files is Ambassador Wafaa Bassem, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. Mrs. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Mrs. Ambassador. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start our discussion for tonight, let's check out some of the main stories making the news today. And we'll start off with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who hailed on Tuesday the distinguished ties that bind Egypt with Brazil. Now, this came during President al-Sisi's meeting with Vice President of Brazil, Hamilton Moro, in the attendance of Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry and the Brazilian ambassador to Egypt, Antonio Patorito. The head of state said he was looking forward to broadening bilateral relations in various domains to benefit from their diverse capabilities. He praised Brazil's development experience, describing it as one of Egypt's important trade partners in Latin America. During the meeting, President Assisi and Morao exchanged visions over Egypt's reaction to a UN Security Council statement about Ethiopia's dam. In this respect, the Brazilian vice president expressed his country's understanding of the significance of the Nile River to Egypt's food and water security. Also, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi met with the Councillor Minister of Justice, Omar Marwan, on Tuesday. Now, during the meeting, the President directed the development and mechanization of the court system and litigation procedures, including the technical development of court headquarters and buildings. The head of state also instructed to promote the use of the latest technologies in the court system in order to facilitate procedures on citizens and achieve the highest levels of justice. Presidential spokesman Bassem said the meeting focused on the implementation of the decisions issued by the last meeting of the Supreme Council of Judicial Bodies, as well as efforts to develop the Ministry of Justice and its offices nationwide to expedite the litigation procedures. Also, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi today delegated the Armed Forces General Commander Defense Minister General Mohammed Zaki to lay a wreath of flowers on the tomb of late former President Gamal Abdel Nasser as Egypt commemorated the 51st anniversary of his death. At a ceremony attended by key figures of the armed forces, Zaki conveyed to the family of late President Abdel Nasser the appreciation and gratitude of President al-Sisi for his pivotal role and relentless efforts that elected Egypt for a pioneering regional and international position. President al-Sisi further hailed late President Abdel Nasser for his exerting efforts that served the Arab and regional causes, in addition to consolidating peoples in their struggle for independence and freedom. The head of state reiterated that this anniversary would be a unique pattern for coming generations that reflects struggles and sacrifices for the sake of the nation and its people. Also, Army Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Mohammed Farid visited the military and police troops in northern Sinai today. Now, the visit was aimed at checking on the security situation, living conditions, and implementation of measures and plans laid out. During the visit, Lieutenant General Mohammed Farid inspected a number of national projects supervised by the armed forces. He also visited a number of governmental institutions in northern Sinai. These were all or rather some of the stories making the news today, but now let's check out this report regarding President Assisi assuring the Libyans Egypt's support for their upcoming elections and the political development taking place there. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi recently held talks in Cairo with Libyan Prime Minister Abdel Hamid Dibdeba, Chief Commander of the Libyan National Army, Field Marshal Khalifa Haftar, and Speaker of the Libyan House of Representatives Aguila Saleh. President al-Sisi told the Libyan Premier that he was confident Libyans would overcome the challenge they face while striving to build a modern and strong government in the state. During their meeting, President al-Sisi and Dibdeba discussed progress of internationally backed political process that would end with parliamentary and presidential elections in December. President al-Sisi pushed for the holding of elections as scheduled next December and said the government would continue its efforts for Libyan brothers to hold a significant presidential parliamentary vote by the end of the year. The president repeated his calls for foreign forces and mercenaries to leave the country. President al-Sisi told the Libyan Premier that Egypt was prepared to extend all necessary resources to prepare the climate for the elections. The president reiterated Egypt's firm position in respect of Libya's sovereignty and territorial integrity, rejecting all forms of foreign intervention in Libya's internal affairs. President al-Sisi confirmed the importance of strengthening the cohesion of Libya's national institutions and uniting its national army to protect the resources of the Libyan people and reinforce their free will. Three senior Libyan officials attended meetings of a high joint Libyan-Egyptian committee, which is mandated to promote closer ties between the neighboring nations. President al-Sisi lauded the endeavors of the Libyan government at the domestic level to improve the living conditions of the Libyan citizens. The president also expressed confidence in the ability of the Libyan people to overcome challenges they are facing in efforts towards the reconstruction of a robust modern state capable of reinforcing security and stability across the nation. The president also valued the recent electoral law passed by Libya's House of Representatives as a cornerstone on the path towards implementing the roadmap agreed upon by the Libyans, which will culminate in holding parliamentary and presidential elections to end of the year as scheduled.
دايما اقول ان الجيش المصري جيش قوي صحيح ومن اقوى جيوش المنطقه صحيح، ولكن هو جيش رشيد، جيش بيحمي مش بيهدد.
سيد الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي رئيس جمهورية مصر العربية، قلب العروبة النابض، نطالبكم وبقوة لحماية ليبيا والحفاظ على سيادتها وثرواتها لصالح أبناء الشعب الليبي، وتحيا ليبيا موحدة بية، وعاشت مصر قلب العروبة النابض. تحيا مصر وليبيا، تحيا مصر وليبيا، تحيا مصر وليبيا.
أدعوكم أيها السادة إلى اتخاذ موقف شجاع، وإننا قد نضطر لدعوة القوات المسلحة المصرية للتدخل إذا حصل تدخل أجنبي في بلادنا.
إن مصر تدخلها لحماية ليبيا وأهلها تدخلا مشروعا لصد الاستعمار والمستعمرين.
إن تنتصروا بنا فسننصركم، إن تنتصروا بنا فسننصركم.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Starting off our discussion right away with Ambassador Bassem. Your Excellency, now Egypt really focuses on the situation in Libya. Libya is Egypt's immediate western neighbor, and really the security and stability and the sovereignty of Libya is part and parcel of Egypt's own national security. Now, we've seen the political developments taking place over the past few years, and all the meetings, the mediation that Egypt was sponsoring between the Libyan factions. Now, the elections, the parliamentary and presidential elections, are slated for December 24th, and recently President Assisi met with the Libyan Premier Dibeba, also Khalifa Haftar, the chief of and the commander-in-chief of the Libyan Armed Forces, and the Speaker of Parliament, Aqil Saleh. Now, what are the main outcomes of such a meeting, and how do you see the process going on for the next 3 months up until December 24th?
I think this is a very critical point of time as far as the Libyan stability and return to normality,
Yes.
if one can say. Of course, there are different steps that have taken place in the past. Some of them have not been implemented, and some of them are on the way. Let's not forget the Egyptian endeavors in Sohairat, for instance. All the work that Egypt has done with the neighboring countries to Libya, all the support that Egypt is giving to the idea, to the principle of a united Libya, that would be able to achieve the aspirations and the hopes of the Libyan people.
Yes.
Of course, there was what we call Berlin I,
Yes.
where Egypt participated very actively, and then Berlin II, which is now sort of part of what we call the roadmap to the stability in Libya. The outcome of Berlin II, which is now the umbrella of the political process, was very clear about 4 important points. The need to meet with the political, let's say, timetable that was put, which is preparing the ground for elections, uniting the different parts of Libya, and preparing technically for viable, credible elections that should take place in December. And in here, we don't have only the presidential elections, but we also have the parliamentarian elections, which mean that we will have a new parliament in Libya that should be united, representing all the regions in Libya. And by the way, I want here to mention that Egypt is almost the only country which is standing at equal distance of all the factions now, and who is able to communicate and to have a dialogue with the different factions. Other countries, other very important players in this file, they have a sort of, I would say, they are more into one side, or they are able to speak with 1 or 2 factions, but not all of them, like Egypt.
Yes.
And that is the fruit of the wisdom, of the efforts, but also the fruit of the long history that is united in Egypt and Libya.
Yes.
We have relations of common security concerns. We have relation of historical support to the Libyan people to reach their independence. We have family relations even. We have many marriages mixed marriages and families that live on both sides of the frontiers.
Yes.
So that makes that mutual knowledge and understanding a very good medium to be able to play a role for Egypt, to play a role in these efforts to bring back Libya to a healthy, viable, credible state, united state.
Yes.
On the other hand, there is a need, according to Berlin as well, to the output, to deal with the mercenaries, to deal with the foreign forces. There is a need to unite the most important, or all the institutions in Libya, parliament, government, army, name it, security institutions, and thus we can enhance the process of reconciliation and conciliation among the different factions in different regions. Finally, there is a strong need to manage the resources of this very rich country, but at the same time who is suffering from poverty, from problems at the level of the Libyan citizen, who does not enjoy the fruits of the presence of such important natural resources and economic wealth and operation.
Yes. Well, Your Excellency, you've mentioned a lot of the important factors that need to be taken care of for the process of the elections to take place. Now, let's break them one by one. You first mentioned how Egypt is at an equal distance from all the different Libyan factions within the country. Now, you've also mentioned the Berlin path, the Berlin roadmap that's been laid out. Now, just to make sure, with the political change that is taking place in Germany, in Berlin, does that carry any sort of possibility that things could change regarding the Berlin path, or is it already laid out, founded, and no change will take place no matter the political change taking place in Germany?
Well, in a political scene, you never say never. Changes are part of the nature of political life, of political processes. But Berlin II, which is the final umbrella under which the roadmap has been designed, which has been accepted by the Libyan people, and thus we are going to have the elections, and thus, hopefully, on time. Thus, there is the government of national unity headed by Mr. Dubaiba. There is a sort of the presidential council, which for the time being is held by Mr. Mohammed El-Manfi. And let's say these are they could be makeshift institutions, but they are making the transition. They are bringing the country from the state of chaos to the state of political viability that would permit parliamentarian elections and presidential elections. These are the institutions and the instances with which the international community is dealing now. In New York, let's remember the part or the mentioning of President El-Sisi to the situation in Libya and to the principles on which Egypt is giving support to the political process in Libya. But not only the political process, there is an economic process. There is that strong attempt and this strong will to put Libya economically and socially back on its feet.
Yes.
And we'll talk about
yes,
the Joint Commission later on. And then there was, if let me continue, for the General Assembly, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, in his meetings with many of his counterparts, France, UK, Italy, Malta, Arab countries as well, and the meetings that were held with the Arab ministers present there, all were discussing. There was a mini Berlin Pass meeting there, where it has been renewed the commitment of the international community to normalize the situation in Libya, to get rid of the foreign presence, to give the Libyans the chance and the right to decide their future for themselves, to self-determine how they want their country to be, their state to be, and to enable them to practice their rights in choosing their parliament, their representatives, and their president, the higher authorities. So in all this, Libya has been in the heart of the talks according to the output of Berlin, and also stressing the importance of the role as facilitators of the neighboring countries of Libya. They have a big role in this.
Also, the French President Emmanuel Macron said that there will be an international conference about Libya that will be taking place on November 12th, which is almost a month before the elections. Is that sort of a follow-up meeting, just supervising and looking over how the political process is looking? Is France also sharing the same distance Egypt is having with the rest of the Libyan factions, or is it different?
I think Egypt is a bit on a one step ahead or two steps ahead. Nevertheless, there is Egypt, most of the players in the Berlin process, the Berlin meetings, are seeing eye to eye the importance of these four outputs. Who is able to talk to everybody about them and to help? Let's say that Egypt comes first, but all the others are committed and they want to do it. You are having some obstacle, some sometimes incoherence in certain positions of important powers, especially with the allegations of the presence of some of foreign forces coming from there. You have obstacles put by some regional players like Turkey as far as withdrawing the foreign troops from Libya, and also the mercenaries coming from every part of the world. You have
well, let's talk about that, Mrs. Ambassador. Now, you've mentioned more than once, and the President mentioned it as well in his speech to the UN, about the withdrawal of those mercenaries and the foreign forces from Libya. Now, we're 3 months far from the December 24th elections. How soon can that happen? How can we guarantee the withdrawal of these mercenaries and foreign forces? And if it doesn't go, if they don't withdraw 100%, and as soon as we would like them to withdraw, what would happen then? Can there still be elections, parliamentary and presidential elections, with presence of some of those mercenary and foreign forces? Who can guarantee their withdrawal?
The only guarantee, and that represents a challenge for the outputs of Berlin, the only guarantee is the presence of the creation of the establishment of a clear mechanism on the withdrawal of these mercenaries and foreign forces, a schedule for their withdrawal, how they will withdraw, what will be done with the I would say, that arsenal of weapons that is present on the Libyan soils. Who should go first and how? You have the formal foreign forces that are there and that are claimed by their countries, that they have been called upon by the former, what they call legal governments. So how would they go out? Especially that there is now this problem of withdrawing the confidence from the actual national unity government, though it's still functioning. So it's some factions that are not confident in this government, but others are supporting it. So the establishment of a mechanism with the help of the international community and the will of the international community is important, very important for the withdrawal of these foreign forces. The other thing is that still the state is not in full control of the army and of the armed forces. There is still a sort of unclear situation. The day the government will be able to control all the armed forces and unite them, that would help also to get rid of the foreign presence there.
Your Excellency, now, if we talk about having a 100% full withdrawal of mercenaries and foreign forces, now, I'll just imagine the worst case scenario. Now, we've seen what happened in Afghanistan recently. Now, I'm not saying that the same would happen in Libya. Libya might have a much more established sort of institutions as an army, a national unity government, a parliament. But should there be some sort of foreign forces there, or do we need a total withdrawal so we can actually see a good exercise of power by these pure Libyan institutions?
Well, that will be the ideal situation, is that you have an elected parliament, an agreed government, an elected president that enjoys the support of all Libyans. If we have this, you are definitely sure to get rid of any foreign presence or the remnants of foreign presence.
Yes.
In what form? It's always easier to get rid of the, let's say, formal and official forces. But for the mercenaries, it will take, I think, some time, a lot of will, a lot of discipline, and an important support from the international community. Not only the main players as states, but also there will be a role for the UN and the peacekeeping operations to help getting rid of this according to a plan that has to be requested and designed by the Libyans themselves with the help of the neighbors, of the international community, and of the international organizations concerned with peace and security.
And can Egypt be helpful in that? I mean, Egypt has had a modern experience in these sort of elections and the transition of power, and we've helped countries such as Tunisia, Algeria, Sudan. Now, can Egypt then transfer their expertise and their helping hand to the Libyan institutions?
Egypt is committed to help the Libyan people, not only as far as foreign forces. No, first Egypt is committed, and that was in the last meeting with of the president with Mr. Dbeibeh, when he assured the readiness of Egypt to present its technical, logistical, and political experience as far as paving the way to have the elections in the determined time in December. Whether Egypt would be there in that plan of liberating Libya from the presence of foreign forces and mercenaries, that will be upon the request of the Libyan people. Because there is one sentence that the president has always expressed to the Libyan politicians, responsibles who came to see him. If you want us to support you, we will support you. If you ask us to support you, we'll support you. And إذا استنصرتمونا ننصركم.
Yes.
And it's very clear. It has to be, we have to respect the sovereignty and the political will of the Libyan people, with no discrimination and no differentiation between them. And this is again the good thing about Egypt being able to speak to the eastern part of Libya, to the western part of Libya, to people in Tripoli, to people in Benghazi. That easiness in communication makes Egypt, let's say, the supporter number one and the facilitator number one and the enforcer number one of the return to life of the Libyan state.
Ambassador Bassem, now you've mentioned all these challenges, talking about the withdrawal of the mercenaries and foreign forces, talking about the timing and the management of the wealth and of Libya, also the parliament having a no-confidence vote in the national unity government. Which one of these challenges you feel would constitute the biggest hurdle, the hardest to overcome?
The presence of foreign forces and the mercenaries, because there are beneficiaries of these foreign forces on the ground, whether as groups, which we call the non-state players,
yes,
or states that are behind the presence of these foreigners on the Libyan soils. There is a lot of interests strategically, expansion of influence, resources.
Yes.
Let's not forget that Libya is very rich, not only in oil and gas, but also in mineral resources, different mineral resources, that it has a great potential of development. They have the land, they have the people, they have the sea, extended coast, which makes it a very important strategic and economic hub.
Yes.
It's the closest source of energy to Europe, to Southern Europe.
Yes.
And thus there is this competition, this fierce competition over who would be in Libya first, who would take the reconstruction of Libya. This conference in France, projected or proposed by the French president, is to take stake how things are going on and to mark we are there. So we have the right to have a piece of what is coming. And it applies to all those who are involved in the political process concerning the return of Libya as a viable state on the international theater. So, and we should be there.
Yes, definitely.
Definitely we should be there, and from this, the activity that is taking place bilaterally between the two countries.
Yes.
We are very much accepted in the Libyan soul, heart, and mind. We have been there helping them to develop with the Egyptian companies, with the Egyptian workers for many decades. It's only what happened lately in the last 10 years that made everything stop for the Libyans themselves. But they are thirsty to develop. They are thirsty to stability. They want to live normal life, to enjoy the resources. And thus there was, you can just see the results of the high joint commission between the two countries, which has been stopped for 10 years.
Yes.
And it's this 11th session of the joint commission came after 10 years from the last one, number 10.
Yes.
And it led to 14 memorandum of understanding in different things. You just name it. Agriculture, oil and gas, energy, electricity, construction and reconstruction, housing, health, higher education. And President has been focusing very much that the priority should go to reconstruction, education, and health.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the President has underlined the importance and Egypt's supporting role to the developments in Libya, and he highlighted that during his speech at the UN General Assembly, the 76th session of the UNGA. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
President Assisi addressed the 76th session of the UN General Assembly in New York, during which he outlined Egypt's vision regarding the number of international and regional issues. Assisi said Egypt has repeatedly confirmed that there is no way to achieve stability in the Middle East without reaching a just, permanent and comprehensive peace for the Palestinian cause, which was and still is the central issue of the Arab nations. This shall take place through negotiations based on resolutions of international legitimacy to establish an independent Palestinian state along the June 4, 1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as its capital. Therefore, Egypt reiterates the importance of firming up the ceasefire that was reached on May 20th of 2021 and calls on the international community to take the necessary measures to improve the living conditions of the Palestinian people, deliver humanitarian aid, and urge the donor communities to support the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees in the Near East, pave the way for reconstruction in the Gaza Strip, taking into consideration Egypt's declaration to allocate $500 million for the Gaza reconstruction. As the Middle East is enjoying an unparalleled geographic location, it is also ranked as one of the most troubled regions in the world. This adds the common global challenges facing the region's countries, other challenges with specifics to each of these countries. This comes as the concept of a strong, cohesive nation-state is now jeopardized by a multitude of destabilizing factors, the essence of which lies in division and fragmentation in its various forms, either sectarian, political, or ethnic. This makes countries rich in their natural resources, history, and ancient civilizations like Iraq, in their culture and religious ethnic diversity like Lebanon and Syria, in their resources, wealth, and distinct location like Libya, or in their strategic locations like Yemen, suffer this magnitude of formidable challenges. This confirms that upholding the all-encompassing concept of nation-state is indispensable, the concept of nation-state that does not differentiate between the people of the same homeland and that prevents interference in Arab affairs. President Assisi said Egypt and Africa are firmly connected and asserted that realizing cooperation among the continent countries will not be attained when one side determines the requirements of the other, but rather this process should be reciprocal. On the Ethiopian dam file, the president referred to a decade-long cycle negotiations among Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia as a result of clear intransigence and unjustified rejections to engage positively with the negotiations process in its successive stages, adding that Egypt restored the UN General Assembly to assume its responsibility regarding the dossier and support African mediation efforts through an effective role by observers from the UN and federally countries. President Assisi asserted that Egypt is still committed to reaching a legally binding, balanced and comprehensive agreement on the filling and operating of the dam so as to protect the existence of 150 million Egyptians and Sudanese and avoiding immeasurable damage to the resources of the two peoples. This is based not only on the values of fairness and logic, but also on a solid international and legal ground that entrenched the principle of fair, equitable use of joint water resources in the basin international rivers.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, continuing our discussion with Ambassador Bassem. Your Excellency, now, before we start talking about some of the construction and reconstruction work that Egypt is participating in within the Libyan borders, now, the decision by the chief commander of the Libyan armed forces, Khalifa Haftar, to step down and step away from his military role and deciding to enter the political spectrum and race and run for the Libyan elections slated for December 24th. What do you think of such a decision?
I think it comes as a natural flow of what Commander Haftar is thinking of himself. He believes that he's able to lead the Libyan people, that he's able to protect the identity of Libya away from fundamentalism or alliance with foreign powers or foreign countries. And for him not to have, for Libya not to be described as a military government, he wants to step down to become a civilian and to leave this military label for the specialized military people, armed forces, and to become a civilian who is running like any other Libyan citizen to be a president of the country. So how will be the reaction of the Libyans or some parts of the Libyan people towards this? It's not very clear yet. It also depends who is running also for the presidential elections and how the whole election process, whether parliamentarian or presidential, will be managed lists-wise, logistically-wise, security-wise. Still, the security situation in Libya is quite fragile. As long as you have weapons on the ground, in the possession, not all the time with the right people, as long as you have mercenaries, as long as you have foreign forces there, as long as you have support from outside players that sometimes you don't know about them. You don't know about who is a non-state player who is doing what by proxy inside the Libyan territory. So it remains to be seen. The next few weeks, I would say they are 3 months, a bit less, we will see a lot of things happening, and probably events will be quite fast and changes will be quite fast.
Yes.
So it's very important to see, it's very critical, and it needs all the wisdom and the nationalism of the Libyan people, not as being chauvinistic or this or that, no, but how much they care for their country to come back in its feet and to regain its place in the region and in the international community. We need to know how the candidates will be presented, but also we need to know how you're going to register the electors themselves, the people who have the right to elect, how they are going to be registered, what will be the form, how would you have an election card, who has the right to vote and who does not.
Yes, it's the basic logistics of the electoral process. Yes.
And the basic mechanisms of voters, elections, candidates are not yet very clear.
Mrs. Ambassador, I mean, you're talking about all these changes that are taking place. Now, quite recently, Egypt has been taking this role of not just holding meetings and summits and mediatings and giving speeches, but Egypt has been actively working in a very supportive role, talking about reconstruction within the Gaza Strip worth $500 million, talking about building a dam in Tanzania, also constructing and reconstructing in Libya. You told me about 6 contracts that are already in effect within the Libyan territory. Now, Egypt really taking on a step forward in practical construction and reconstruction within Libya. What does this say about the real regional role Egypt is playing in the brotherly Arab countries as well?
Well, it's simply that Egypt has moved away from beautiful speech to implementation on the ground.
Yes.
It's not only agreements that are being signed and we are happy to have them in the media and this and that, but they are being translated into facts. Yes, there are 14 memo which have been signed this time in the presence of the 2 prime ministers, but there was also another 10 that were signed before, during the visit of Prime Minister Dr. Madbouli to Libya last April, I think.
Yes.
And there is an agreement on the Joint Commission for Trade and Industry now, which is very important. The 6 contracts are 6 executive contracts for circular road, for the 3rd circular road around the cities in Libya. You have something on the implementation of the network for electricity. You have already contracts concerning the rehabilitation of Agbalia Road in Libya by, and it's big knowledge, it's not promotion, by the Arab Contractors Group, by Orascom Group, by another consultative company who is doing the feasibility studies.
Yes. Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but ladies and gentlemen, as you've heard Her Excellency, Mrs. Ambassador Bassem, Egypt is really implementing its supportive and pivotal role in the developments and the stability of Libya and other brotherly Arab countries, and we'll be following all these developments taking place in Libya here on Nile TV International. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank my very distinguished guest, Ambassador Wafaa Bassem, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. Your Excellency, always a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Henny Saif. Thank you for joining us.